Welcome back to the third and final part of my 2022 CanQuest. For those just joining, be sure to check out the first two parts, linked in the description, but enough formalities, let's get into the home stretch here. The first film I saw on my last day was Armageddon Time, the latest film from James Gray. Now this is a film I spent 2 hours lined up for, and for me, this was well worth the wait. I'm not necessarily a huge James Gray fan, I've only seen his two most recent films, but he's always struck me as a pretty versatile filmmaker, whose only main linking threads between his works was this hazy lighting and a very distanced perspective on his subject matter. Now both of those attributes are applicable to Armageddon Time as well, but that more detached point of view is an essential factor here because Gray is essentially making his version of 400 Blows or Belfast. So taking a less rosy look at the material, in more of a Truffaut way than a Branagh way, gives Gray the chance to look back on his upbringing in a way that's at once sympathetic and critical. The premise basically revolves around Gray's prepubescent stand-in navigating a pre-Reagan New York with a new African-American friend he's made, showing how their differences in social standing at this time made for different consequences for the shenanigans they got up to. Because of this more objective point of view, Gray really dives into the implications of white privilege and some of the obliviousness, some might call it blatant hypocrisy, of one marginalized group taking every chance they could to make a better life while turning their noses up at another more marginalized group. I think that coming out of Armageddon Time with the main takeaway being use your white privilege is an understandable mistake, but I think Gray's actual point is to show that struggling to make your way past oppression often involves taking every leg up you can get, even if that means ignoring those who are treated as lower than you on society's totem pole. Not really an endorsement, but more of a blunt acknowledgement of this survivalist mindset. Star-wise, this is probably the most packed film at Cannes this year, with Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, and Anthony Hopkins all delivering near-peak work. Hopkins especially takes the tired, loving grandpa role and carves his name right into stone. The only weak link, quite honestly, is Michael Banks-Rapata, the lead who plays Gray's substitute. He's not especially bad, particularly for a child performer, but anytime this character needs to speak, he's outmatched by his seasoned colleagues, and his other young co-star, to such a distracting degree. It's a shame that the only weak link is the character whose identification is probably most essential, but what makes Armageddon Time soar is James Gray's perspective on his childhood, not necessarily the childhood itself. So with that said, Armageddon Time gets an 8 out of 10 for me. Maybe even an 8.5. Next up was Crimes of the Future. Yeah, I know by the time this video comes out it will have already been in theaters for at least a week, but you know what, I saw it when it was still unreleased.
Go fuck yourself, man. Think you're better than me.
I am better than you.
This is of course the latest from David Cronenberg, making a return after an 8-year hiatus, and okay, let me get this out of the way right now, I am not a Cronenberg fan. Now I realize that's a sacrilegious statement both as a cinephile and as a Canadian, but I'm sorry, body horror has never been a strong spot for me, and even his non-horror stuff has always just struck me as massively overhyped. Oftentimes, his approach to character work and integrating the more squeamish elements to his films just comes across to me as surprisingly flat. So with that said, it should come as no surprise to anyone that Crimes of the Future was fucking boring. If we're to believe that Cronenberg has had the ideas for this film floating around in his head for nearly 20 years, then it's clear from the final product that the man never made it past his first page of notes. This movie is so focused on taking bullet point ideas and then trying to integrate them into a more philosophical, meaning of life thematic territory, but none of these ideas get enough room to breathe or develop into anything interesting. The basic premise of this futuristic setting is cool enough, but Cronenberg just relegates everything to these flat conversations on topics like the art world or what it means to be human. As if we didn't just get a movie from the actual best Canadian director, asking that question in the midst of a real narrative with intrigue and, you know, characters. As far as performances go, Viggo Mortensen and Lea Seydoux are fine, although Viggo should really lay off the shit-talking of other directors when his go-to collaborator is putting out stuff like this. But the main standout here is Kristen Stewart. Now that she's become a good actress, because no, she wasn't a misunderstood ingenue in her Twilight days, she was genuinely bad back then.
Oh! What? What did you just say? I'm sorry, it's true.
Cronenberg has actually made the interesting choice to play up the mannerisms that always came off as awkward and distracting, rather than suppressing them, in order to make her presence much creepier. And the result is extremely effective, even though she, like most aspects of this movie, is far too underused. So yeah, Crimes of the Future is a dud. But if you're a Cronenberg worshipper, you'll probably enjoy its droning pace and gore to philosophizing ratio far more than I did. Crimes of the Future gets hit with a generous 5 out of 10. Making it closer to the end, the penultimate movie I saw in Cannes was Tori and Lokita. This is the latest from Jean-Pierre and Dardenne, which should probably tell you all you need to know about what you're getting into with this one. Now, I love the Dardenne brothers, even though I found their second Palme d'Or win to be pretty underwhelming and their most recent film to be close to a misfire. Aside from those, I completely adored The Kid with a Bike and 2 Days, One Night, so I had decently high hopes for Tori and Lokita, which more or less stays within the bounds of what you'd expect from these directors. This is the story of two African refugees in Belgium, who are forced to navigate the harshness of both the bureaucratic system that makes resettling a challenge, and the illegal activities they're forced to take part in to stay afloat. The performances here from Bundu Jolie and Pablo Schills are fantastic. Not exaggerated in any way, but still translating the anxiety of their situation, which works hand in hand with the Dardennes' usual choice of frenetic handheld cinematography. The narrative goes to unexpected places, especially with such a brisk runtime, which, again, is par for the course with these guys. Maybe the film was a bit too quick to let the narrative spiral into tragedy, but that speed does help ramp up the unease of the story. Now, even as far as the Dardenne brothers are concerned, Tori and Lokita gets pretty dark and depressing, to the point where I wouldn't blame anyone for tapping out and accusing the brothers of marring their film in pity rather than empathy. But clearly the brothers care about these characters, and point the blame squarely, but not unsubtly, at the system that throws people into this kind of situation. If you like socio-political filmmaking that leans towards the left, I'd suggest making those other two Dardenne brothers films a priority watch. But Tori and Lokita is definitely a step back in the right direction for these directors, even if the main aspect separating this from their other work is just how dark it's willing to go. Tori and Lokita comes in hot with another 8 out of 10. And finally, this year's Cannes quest ends with the newest film from Kelly Reichardt, Showing Up. In the grand scheme of things, this may seem like a pretty slight and anticlimactic way to cap off the Cannes Film Festival, but you know what, with so many heavy films this year about child exploitation and backward social norms, and Cronenberg fans waiting nearly a decade for this, watching something this feather light was a nice way to unwind after 3 days of unrelenting moviegoing. As with all Reichardt films, Showing Up is a pretty low-key story, but even for Reichardt, the stakes here are astronomically low. The premise is that Michelle Williams plays an Oregon sculptor who tries to make her gallery deadline while she's forced to reluctantly take care of a wounded pigeon. That's it, that's basically the entire movie. Sound boring? Well, for some people it definitely will be, but there's really a soothing benefit to watching one of Reichardt's films. And with one this low stakes, you're really able to just sit back and let the atmosphere of watercolors and wannabe Warhols wash over you. Michelle Williams carries this entire movie on her back, with the biggest, grumpiest I hate Mondays energy you're likely to ever see on screen. Most of her lines would read on the page as entirely unremarkable, but her irritated delivery is damn near worthy of national treasure status. If Margaret Qualley in Stars at Noon radiates done with this shit energy through a tragically defeated lens, Williams radiates that same energy through a more lighthearted view. But still, Showing Up never talks down to this character or her ambitions. She wants her sculpting project to go well, and her demeanor is so entertaining and relatable that you're right there on board with her. With a cast that includes Hong Chow, Judd Hirsch, and Andre freaking 3000, it's really Williams who takes on the bulk of this runtime with just her exhausted frown and a slumped posture, with only a dumb pigeon to keep her company. And the end result is a breezy little film that may strike some as an odd addition to the Cannes lineup, but works as a refreshing shift of pace. If you're already a Reichardt fan, Showing Up will give you exactly what you want. And if you're someone else who's simply in the mood for something understated and relaxed, then this might be a great introduction for you. Showing Up shows up with a breezy 7.5 out of 10. And that concludes the 2022 Cannes Quest. Thank you all so much for walking through this journey with me. I really hope to continue the series for as many years as humanly possible, but for now this was a great year to get the ball rolling. Once again, be sure to check out the first 2 parts if you haven't already, and let me know what you're most excited for. Have you seen any of these films? Am I way off base about Crimes of the Future? Sound off in the comments, have a great day, and as always, I'll see you when I see you.